Hello, I'm Alex. Today, we're going on a journey back in time. Welcome to Chicago in 1893 for the World's Columbian Exposition.
Imagine closing your eyes in a dirty, industrial city, smelling of manure and coal smoke, only to open them in an ancient paradise. Before you is not the Chicago everyone knew as the slaughterhouse of the world, but a dazzling mirage of white marble, golden domes, and endless colonnades. The year is 1893. We are in the heart of the Columbian Exposition, which contemporaries call the White City.
Incredible, I've never seen
Over
anything
6
so
months,
grand.
27 million people, a quarter of the
scale is just
entire United
unbelievable.
States population at the
White
time,
City is
will
real.
visit.
A marvel of the age.
People spent their last cents, went hungry, and traveled across the country by train just to catch a single glimpse of this wonder. But while millions marveled at the triumph of human reason, just 3 miles from this grandeur, in the Inglewood neighborhood, stood another building, a grim 3-story structure occupying an entire block. Locals called it the Castle. Its owner, the charming Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, was at that very moment smiling at another young female guest who had come to the fair for a new life. He personally helped her carry her suitcase to a room she would never leave. Today, we will live these 20 minutes in 1893 Chicago, a place where light and darkness met in ultimate concentration. To understand why this city appeared at all, we must remember the year 1871. That was when the Great Fire practically wiped Chicago off the face of the earth. The city didn't just rise from the ashes, it did so with fury and pride. When America was deciding where to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of the continent, New York was certain of its victory. Senators from the East Coast mocked the country bumpkins from Illinois. What can these butchers show the world besides beef carcasses? It was for this arrogance of its politicians that Chicago was nicknamed the Windy
Send me
City,
another brick.
not because of the
Quick.
weather, but because its leaders
More
were
bricks
full of
coming
hot
up.
air. But
Steady on
Chicagoans
order.
weren't just shaking the
Setting fire.
air. Architect Daniel Burnham received 700 acres of swampy land and an order: create the greatest architectural ensemble in human history in a record 2 years. Burnham achieved the impossible. He gathered the country's best architects and forced them to work as a single mechanism. But what was this marble paradise actually made of? There was no time for real stone. The buildings were constructed of staff, a mixture of plaster, lime, and hemp
The
fibers.
staff sets quick.
It was a brilliant
Keep it
deception.
moving. Aye, spread
Builders
and smooth.
applied this
Next
mixture to wooden frames
Frames
and
ready.
then,
More
for the
plaster
first
here.
time in history,
Good pace.
used
White City
sprayers
needs it.
to paint everything a dazzling white. It was a giant theatrical prop. But when the sun reflected off these facades in the waters of the lagoon, people fell to their knees, believing they were seeing the New Jerusalem. The main hero of this fairy tale was electricity. In those years, most U.S. homes still burned kerosene lamps and candles. The battle for the contract to light the fair became the legendary War of Currents. Thomas Edison demanded $1 million, certain that without his patents, the city wouldn't shine. But Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse offered half the price and an alternating current system. On May 1st, 1893, President Grover Cleveland pressed a golden button. In that same second, 100,000 lamps flashed simultaneously. A collective gasp rose from thousands of people in the night silence. The night was defeated. Tesla personally walked through the pavilions, passing a current of 2 million volts
Observe, the
through his
current
own
flows
body,
through me, illuminating
lighting
these
lamps
bulbs
in his
without harm.
palms.
This is the
To the
safe
average
power
person of that
alternating
time,
current.
it wasn't science.
See the
It was
arc stands?
pure
Proof
magic.
of my system.
People came to the
Observe
fair
this tube
not
filled
just
with
for
a
the
rarefied
architecture.
gas.
They came
When I
to see
apply
the
current,
future.
electricity flows.
In the
See
pavilions,
sparks?
one could taste a strange
new era
brown,
begins.
bubbly drink, Dr. Pepper, for the first time in their lives. Here, people also chewed juicy fruit gum and tried Heinz sauce for the first time. But the most popular spot was the Midway Plaisance. Here, America felt the taste of mass entertainment for the first time. Chicago's answer to the Eiffel Tower was the world's first Ferris wheel, designed by engineer George Ferris. It was a steel monster as tall as a 26-story building. Each of the 36 cabins was the size of a bus, and could hold 60 people at once. When the wheel began to slowly lift you above Lake Michigan, you saw a horizon that was previously accessible only to birds. But the Columbian Exposition was not only a triumph of engineering, it was an exhibition of human oddities. Few know that it was here in Chicago that modern anthropology was born in its most controversial form. Along the Midway, entire human zoos were constructed. Organizers brought hundreds of people from the most remote corners of the planet. They were forced to live in enclosures mimicking their homelands and perform rituals for the public's amusement. For the average American of that time, who had never traveled outside their state, it was a shocking sight. It was the first time globalization hit the consciousness of the common man, evoking both wonder and a deep sense of superiority. At the same time, the most advanced security system of the era, Burnham's detectives, operated at the fair. Hundreds of plainclothes officers kept order, catching pickpockets who flocked to Chicago from all over the world. But the irony of fate was that while the police were looking for thieves, the real monster, H. Holmes, was himself the embodiment of law and order in the eyes of society. He moved in high circles, paid his taxes, and was a respected pharmacy owner.
By thunder, look at that.
Let's return to his
It's marvelous.
castle for a
That
moment.
statue over there?
Do you know what
Wow,
was the
can I
most
touch
eerie
it?
thing about its
Sight.
architecture?
Fascinating.
It wasn't just the
Ingenuity is
gas
unparalleled.
chambers. Holmes
There it is,
installed a
my dear.
complex
The
system of
largest
electric
wheel ever
alarms under the
It's
carpets in the
magnificent.
hallways.
The view must be breathtaking.
When he sat in his
Imagine the
second
city
floor
from up
office,
there.
the flashes
way
of
for the
small
captains?
lamps told him exactly which way his guest was walking, whether they had left their room or were trying to go downstairs. He turned his house into a huge living organism, where he was the brain and the residents were unsuspecting cells being continuously hunted. Even the food at the fair had a double bottom. While people stood in lines for the world's first boxed Cracker Jack popcorn, the laborers who built these great pavilions lived in shacks on the outskirts, where typhus was rampant. The contrast between the gilded domes and the poverty outside the exhibition fence was so great that many predicted this city of the future wouldn't last long. And they were right. However, while orchestras played and exotic dancers from around the world performed on the Midway, the Black City, the real Chicago, with its endless slaughterhouses, soot, and grime, continued its life. And it was here, in the shadow of greatness, that Henry Howard Holmes thrived. Holmes was the perfect product of the metropolis. Charming with a soft voice, he was a master of manipulation. His World's Fair Hotel was built on credits he never repaid. He constantly fired builders, hiring new ones every 2 weeks. Why? So that not a single person besides himself knew the full layout of the building. Inside, this house was a waking nightmare. Vault-like rooms that were soundproof, hallways ending in dead walls, stairs leading nowhere. Holmes installed gas pipes in every room, controlled from his office. He could simply turn a lever, and the guest in room 204 would slowly fall into eternal sleep. But the most terrifying place was the basement. There stood an anatomical table, huge vats of acid, and an industrial furnace. Holmes was not just a killer, he was an entrepreneur. He carefully stripped the flesh from the bones of his victims and sold the expertly assembled skeletons to medical schools across the country. In the chaos of the fair, with thousands of people arriving and leaving every day, no one looked for the missing young women. They simply vanished into the big city. By the autumn of 1893, the celebratory atmosphere began to change. The U.S. economy was sinking into a deep depression. Thousands of unemployed people roamed the streets, looking at the golden domes of the fair with hatred. And 2 days before the official closing, an event occurred that shocked the nation. Chicago's popular mayor, Carter
Careful now, these
Harrison,
are for rush or
was shot in
damage.
his own home
Aye,
by a
heavy is sick.
disgruntled
One more
job
after
seeker.
this. Right.
Instead
Back
of
to
a
the next one,
grand
quick
final
now.
firework display,
This night's work will
a
haunt
funeral
us.
procession moved through the White City. The fairy tale had come to an end. After the fair closed, the fate of the White City was both tragic and symbolic. These majestic buildings were not built to last centuries. A few months later, a fire broke out in the empty pavilions. The plaster and hemp burned with incredible intensity. Chicagoans stood on the lakeshore and watched their dream of a perfect world turn into black smoke. Of the grandeur of the Columbian Exposition, only one building remains today, the Museum of Science and Industry, which had been faced with stone in time. Holmes was caught 2 years after the fair, but not for the murders, rather for an insurance scam. When police entered his castle, they were horrified by what was hidden behind ordinary doors. Before his execution, he said a phrase that still causes shivers. "I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing."
Let me know in the comments which scene was your favorite. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more historical reconstructions like this, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.